I never imagined that moving into Oak Ridge Estates would come with a neighbor like Karen. After 3 decades of military service, I was ready to trade uniform inspections and deployment schedules for quiet mornings and peace of mind. The neighborhood seemed like a dream: quiet cul-de-sacs, manicured lawns, and a comforting sense of order. Exactly what I thought I wanted. But peace, as it turned out, wasn't part of the HOA president's agenda. Her name was Karen Wilkins, and she ran Oak Ridge Estates like a personal kingdom. It began with the smallest things. The very first week, I mounted a modest American flag beside my front door, standard size, properly placed. The next morning, I found a bright yellow notice taped to my door. Flag display violates Section 4.3 of the HOA guidelines. Remove immediately. I reread it twice, certain there must have been some mistake. I'd combed through those bylaws before buying the house. There was nothing banning flags. I called the HOA office, and after a few transfers, a voice came on the line. "Mr. Mitchell." Karen sighed, stretching my name like a reprimand. "We have standards here in Oak Ridge Estates. Your flag is in a non-approved location. You'll need to file a request with the Architectural Committee." Her tone wasn't informative. It was patronizing, like a teacher scolding a misbehaving student. Still, I played by the rules. I filed the paperwork, attached photos, and waited. 2 weeks later, a denial letter arrived with no explanation. The next day, I ran into Karen by the community mailboxes. She barely met my eyes, just offered that smug, knowing smirk that said, "You'll learn how things work here." That was my first real sign that something deeper was going on. It wasn't just the flag, it was me, or more specifically, what I represented. One chilly morning, I threw on my old service jacket before heading to check the mail. Karen was walking her little white terrier down the sidewalk. The moment she saw me, she froze. Her expression tightened. "We don't do that here," she said curtly, waving a manicured hand toward my jacket. "This isn't a military base. That kind of thing makes people uncomfortable." I just stared at her, speechless. I'd served 30 years for this country, and never once had anyone told me that a service jacket was uncomfortable. From that day forward, the harassment escalated. Notices appeared constantly. My lawn was half an inch too long. My garbage can sat at the curb too long after pickup. Even my mailbox, which was perfectly standard, was deemed the wrong shade of black. Each time, I complied. I trimmed, painted, adjusted, thinking maybe it would buy me some peace. But instead, things took a darker turn. My mail started vanishing. At first, I assumed it was a simple error: lost bills, misdelivered letters. But when my Veterans Affairs check stopped arriving for 2 months, I knew something was wrong. I called the VA and they confirmed the checks had been issued. They suggested contacting the post office. When I spoke with a postal worker, her concern was immediate. "Mr. Mitchell, you're not the first one in Oak Ridge Estates to report this," she said softly. That's when I started watching closely. Every day, same time, I checked the box right after delivery. Some days, nothing, empty. It didn't make sense. Friends told me they'd sent birthday cards and small packages, none of which I received. Then came the breaking point: a certified letter for my daughter, filled with photos of my newborn grandson, vanished. Even though the tracking showed delivered, that evening, my neighbor Tom Rodriguez walked over as I sat on my porch. Tom's a quiet guy, young family, keeps to himself. He looked uneasy. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice, "I think you need to see something." Tom had installed a security camera after his kid's bike went missing. He pulled out his tablet and opened a clip. My jaw clenched as I watched it play. There she was, Karen Wilkins, in broad daylight, opening my mailbox, flipping through the letters, and slipping a few into her oversized purse. "She did it 3 different times," Tom said, swiping through more footage. "At first, I thought maybe she was dropping something off for you. But then," he hesitated and tapped the next video. Karen was shown tossing a handful of envelopes into the trash bin at the neighborhood park. I sat back, silent, fury burning in my chest. This wasn't just petty HOA power tripping. This was mail theft. A federal crime. Tom offered to send me the files, which I immediately backed up. That night, I called the police non-emergency line and explained what I had. The moment I mentioned mail theft, The officer connected me to a detective. By the next morning, Detective Rivera arrived at my doorstep. She was calm, professional, but I could tell she was disturbed by what she saw. "Mr. Mitchell," she said after reviewing the footage, "this is serious. Mail theft is a federal offense. We'll need to involve the Postal Inspection Service." She took my statement and the videos, promising to move fast. 3 days later, I was checking what little mail had actually shown up when I heard the click of heels on the pavement. Karen. Her familiar smug grin was back in place as she stopped a few feet from me. "Finding everything you need?" she asked with mock concern, her voice syrupy and false like she was auditioning for sincerity. I decided to play along. "Actually, no," I replied evenly. "I seem to be missing quite a bit of mail lately. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" I kept my tone calm, almost conversational. Her eyes flickered just for a second, and a faint flush crept up her neck. But her voice stayed sharp. "How would I know about your mail? Maybe you're just not as important as you think," she said with a brittle laugh. "Not everyone gets thank you cards for just doing their job." Her words were meant to sting, but I refused to take the bait. I kept my voice steady. "Actually, Karen, some of what's missing includes federal documents, VA benefits correspondence, and personal letters to my family. Odd how they all seem to vanish between the moment they're delivered and when I collect them." My even tone must have rattled her because her mask started slipping. Her shoulders stiffened, and her voice rose in volume. "You military types always think you're so special, don't you?" she snapped. "Always expecting recognition, discounts, praise, the world's sympathy. The rest of us work hard too, you know." Her voice echoed across the street, drawing curtains and opening doors. Neighbors began to step out quietly, forming a silent audience along the sidewalks. "I've never asked for special treatment, Karen," I said, still calm. "Just for the mail that's legally mine, and that's when she lost control completely. You don't deserve any of it," she shouted, her face twisting with rage. "All those thank you for your service cards and government handouts. It's disgusting." By now her breathing was heavy and her hands trembled with fury. The neighbors looked on, stunned. From across the street, Tom Rodriguez stepped forward, his phone discreetly recording. Karen suddenly realized she had an audience. She straightened her blouse, trying to recover that polished HOA president composure. "I'm simply saying," she began, forcing a laugh, "that the HOA has rules about mailbox standards. Yours needs to be replaced." Tom's quiet voice cut through the tension. "That's not what you just said, Karen. We all heard you." Her face drained of color. She shot Tom a glare that could have cut glass, then spun around and stormed back toward her house without another word. I met Tom's eyes and nodded once. We both knew what had just happened. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Detective Rivera. "Mr. Mitchell, we've made progress," she said. "The postal inspector executed a search warrant on Ms. Wilkins' property. We recovered a large amount of mail belonging to you and several other residents. We also have her on video disposing of mail in public trash bins. She's being taken into custody right now." I didn't feel triumph, just relief. Relief that it was finally over. Moments later, the sound of sirens filled the neighborhood. Red and blue lights flashed through my front window. I stepped outside just in time to see Karen, handcuffed, being escorted to a patrol car. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, struggling against the officers. "I'm the president of the HOA. Do you know who I am? I was protecting our property values." Her protests carried through the cul-de-sac as neighbors gathered, whispering and filming. She caught sight of me watching from my porch and pointed, her voice shrill with fury. "He's the problem. People like him bring down neighborhoods like this. He doesn't belong here." The officer quietly shut the car door, cutting off her tirade, and the vehicle rolled away, taking her reign of intimidation with it. Within minutes, Tom was at my porch again. "Sir," he said, extending his hand, "I'm sorry about all of this. We had no idea." Other neighbors followed, people who had barely spoken to me before, introducing themselves, offering apologies, even bringing food. One by one, they admitted they'd also faced Karen's bullying but were too afraid to challenge her. It turned out, her authority had stretched far beyond my mailbox. The following week, the postal inspector personally returned my recovered mail. more than 60 pieces in total. VA documents, bills, birthday cards, and the long-lost envelope with photos of my grandson. The HOA board, now led by new members, called an emergency meeting. They issued a formal apology to me and to every resident Karen had harassed. But the story didn't stop there. A local reporter picked up the story. Veterans' mail stolen by HOA president. And within days, the news spread. The piece went viral, and suddenly my quiet retirement was anything but. A few days later, I got a call from a state senator. He'd seen the story on TV, and he recognized me. 25 years ago, during a mission in Afghanistan, I'd helped rescue his son's unit. He remembered my name. The story took on a life of its own. Karen's arrest became a symbol of small-town corruption and abuse of power. When her preliminary hearing began, the courtroom was packed. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage, seized mail, witness statements, even her own recorded outburst on Tom's phone. When the judge read the charges, mail theft, obstruction of correspondence, harassment and civil rights violations, Karen's signature smugness evaporated. The prosecutor reminded the court that mail theft is a federal offense punishable by up to 5 years in prison, and that targeting a veteran for harassment carries additional penalties. The judge set bail at $50,000 and ordered her to surrender her passport. Karen's complexion drained as reality hit. "But I was just enforcing the rules," she muttered, voice trembling as the bailiff led her away. "I was protecting our community." No one, not the judge, not the audience, not even her former allies, seemed convinced. In the end, she was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, 5 years of probation, and ordered to pay $25,000 in fines and restitution. As they escorted her out, she looked back at me with an expression twisted by disbelief and fury, the look of someone who could not comprehend that her power had finally run out. In her mind, she was still protecting Oak Ridge Estates, but to everyone else, she had become the cautionary tale, proof that in even the quietest neighborhoods, power unchecked can turn the smallest person into a tyrant. And that peace, true peace, only exists when someone finally stands up to it.